Welcome to our special edition New Flesh podcast, the podcast you deserve. My name is Ricky Allpike and I'm joined by Jonathan Astro.
Ricky, I'm delighted to be here. This is exciting. I thought, since it's the holiday season, people have a bit of time up their hands, that we'd do a recommended reading episode, or a summer reading episode. I have a specific goal in mind, okay? Now, I want everyone listening to this to read Infinite Jest.
And what is Infinite Jest?
Well, it's by David Foster Wallace. It's from 1996. Now, this is a big book, relatively famous, I think, for various reasons. It did start very, very big, and I think it's gained in popularity, obviously. So David Foster Wallace is a brilliant short story author, nonfiction writer, and novelist. He wrote 3 novels. The first was his honours thesis, The Broom of the System. So he wrote that when he was only in college. His final work was released posthumously in 2011. So his birth date was 1962. Technically a very, very, very late boomer, I think, but he's more voice of a Generation X. He died, unfortunately, in 2008. Now, this book, Infinite Jest, came out in the 90s. It had a huge debut. And just on Wallace, Wallace has got a couple of other things that are worth mentioning. He's also a recipient of the MacArthur Fellows Program. CASH, which is another name for this grant, is called the Genius Grant. It's typically given to 20 or 30 individuals working in any field who've shown extraordinary originality and dedication in their creative pursuits and a marked capacity for self-direction. 500,000, I think, delivered over a few years or whatever. He's an erudite thinker. He's got a background in philosophy, mathematics, English grammar. I think he's generation
and tennis.
And tennis. How could I forget the tennis?
Wasn't he almost a professional tennis player?
Yeah, he almost went pro. Like he got pretty high up in the state leagues, I think, and then made that decision when he plateaued to give it away. Tennis features in his writing a lot as well. But I think he's Generation X's champion dissident and possibly their greatest artist. So if I had to pick one Generation X artist, I think he's the voice of that generation. Absolutely.
Now, I haven't read Infinite Jest. You have, and you're a big fan. I've read a little bit of it, actually, because you did send me a Kindle version a couple of years ago, and I never got around to finishing it. So this book has been seen as a polarizer. Like you either love it or you hate it. And maybe the length of it has something to do with that. Maybe the footnotes have something to do with that. But it's an investment of time. So 50 to 80 hours to read it.
Yes. But you've raised the issues, and I think we need to tackle these. So my goal is specific. I want whoever's listening to this, I want them to invest the time, but I need to convince you that that's something worthwhile. So I'm going to try on you, Ricky. I need to convince you that it's worth your time. So you've said a few things which I agree with. Infinite Jest is long, 980 pages, or about 1,079 with endnotes. So he's got these sort of footnotes that appear on some pages. The story's complex. People say, why does it need to be so complex? People say there's too many characters, and that makes me angry, is probably how people feel. The language, sometimes difficult or strange. It makes me feel dumb, is probably what people are thinking. Annoying people like this book. This is a big one, okay?
Annoying people like this book.
Yes. Annoying people like this book. Now, that's a huge one for me. Judgmental nerds, gatekeepers, alt-right figures, wankers, pick your bad guy, okay?
Do the alt-right like this?
Well, I don't think the alt-right necessarily, but I could see why a certain intellectual right-leaning figure might like it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can see the link. So they don't necessarily love it, but I'm just saying that it's got a reputation, you know what I mean? So they've probably told you to read it. And there is a certain kind of woman who smarmily will make fun of men who read or know about this book. So I've actually met this type of person, and they'll make fun of it and they'll make fun of you having not read it, which is quite a fascinating experience because everyone knows that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover necessarily.
Yeah.
But this is a book that seems to, people don't mind trashing, even though they haven't read it, which I understand. I know where that comes from. So people say the book needs a good edit. It's self-indulgent. Life's too short. Only white male narcissists like David Foster Wallace, whatever. Okay. But I got a range of reasons why I think you should read Infinite Jest. Firstly, it's a peerless piece of art. I think it's a staggering achievement from a singular mind, truly original work. It's also my favorite book of all time. And I know you shouldn't say that often, but it is. I've read it several times. It's worthy of your time. Why is it worthy of your time? Because not everything is, but I think this is. Why is it? I think it's worth 20 Netflix series. I think if you read it, or if you read rather, I think it's worth 50 middlebrow book club books. You know what I mean? This is well worth it. It is a time investment, but I think it's worth it. It is challenging at times, but then again, this is the problem with that. Anything worthwhile is exactly that.
Mm.
I've read and listened to it several times, and I can't wait to do it again. Now, the first time was difficult, but who out there is thinking that only the easy is good? Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, sometimes it depends what you're got going on in your life. I mean, you might have a lot of hectic stuff going on, but if you can muster the strength, I would encourage you to do so, because like going to the gym, you need to test yourself to get stronger. It's a work that comfortably sits among the greatest works of all time. It owes a little debt to some important works from the past. Not that it really matters. You don't have to know anything about these works, but for me, it's important that it owes a debt to Hamlet and incorporates that. And that's where the title comes from. It's a reference to a line in Hamlet, Infinite Jest. Other great works, The Odyssey and The Brothers Karamazov. So this is a book with big, great ambitions, and I think it gets there.
Mm.
This is where we start getting into the thick of it. Okay, this is the main reason you need to read it. It's relevant to the times you live in. So David Foster Wallace predicted much of what we are experiencing right now. Okay,
I did read that he predicted Netflix.
he did predict Netflix. And there are other technologies in the book that he prefigures or explores, but the most important thing and interesting thing is the general mood. Okay, it's a society in the book obsessed with fame and entertainment, an America very much in its decline, powering its leisure-obsessed society and flinging toxic waste into Canada. It's people searching for meaning wherever they can. Elite academic pursuits, fame, drugs, TV, whatever. This is the world that we're living in. It was true in the 90s, and it's still true. Okay, it was the first time I had read a book where I recognized 100% the problem. In a way that when you read some old books, you sort of go, oh yeah, that's interesting. Like I don't really know. I don't really have a personal experience, but this is a book that you will read and go and say, that's a world I understand, because David Foster Wallace understands the world you live in. Okay.
And he was able to look at what was happening with cable TV and project what's happening now, because 1996, the internet existed, but that was Internet 0.1, which was mostly static pages of businesses and stuff like that. It wasn't, social media didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist, streaming services didn't exist. So was he able to sort of assess the situation and go, well, this is the future?
Yeah, which is that's the amazing thing, is that he's just so plugged in to what was going on and what is going on. So if you've ever had this gnawing feeling that something's missing, that horror you feel while scrolling endless thumbnails on Netflix, or this book can help you diagnose the existential malaise that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
I desperately want to know what David Foster Wallace thinks about 2021. You know what I mean? The times we live in. But maybe he's already told us. But most of all, this book is fun and funny. There are hilarious exchanges in the book that will be with you forever. He said, although it's a piece of, sort of avant-garde fiction, he said that he wanted it to be fun and funny, and he didn't think that these kinds of books were doing that at the time. So I've got a few life hacks for you before we get into just some of the narrative. which I think is very interesting. If you're interested, if you're sort of already half sold, but you're just looking for practical strategies, I'll give them to you now, and then we'll get into some narrative, and you can skip that if you just want to go in cold. So here, you need practical strategies because some of the hurdles we've spoken about are real. It's long, it's dense, it's complex. And now here's my biggest tips for tackling Infinite Jest this summer. So who said you have to read it? There's an audiobook version with a fantastic narrator. It's available on Audible. If you're fully committed, then you could get the print version, either print or you get it on Kindle, but also get the audiobook, and then you can just go between them, whatever you like there. If you just, if you've only got time to listen, that's absolutely fine. This audiobook is great.
Now, with the audiobook, how do they treat the end notes?
Okay, so that's my next point. The end notes are, it'll just be like, so the end notes are numbered. And so the narrator will be like, blah, 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 blah. And then you hear this voice every now and then and say like, number one or whatever, or not one. And then it'll just be like a different voice that'll just say a number. Mm-hmm. It only happens periodically. And you can just ignore it. Don't worry about it. You can get the end notes separately, but don't worry about them. Because what I'm going to say about the end notes, because what if you read the book like a purist, you'd read it, and when you come to an end note, when you come to a footnote, it'd say like 1, and then you'd flip to the back of the book, read that note, and then go back to where you were, okay? I'm going to say the end notes are a bonus. Purists are going to tell you that they're essential. I even went to the main fan page for this book, and they say, oh, the audiobook doesn't have the end notes, which are essential to the enjoyment and understanding of this. Now, these are the people you shouldn't be talking to. You shouldn't be engaging with these people. These are purists. These are fundamental extremists. Don't worry about those people. I've read this book many times. Okay. Now, if you know a couple of things, you don't need to read the end notes. Okay. I agree that it can make it a better experience, but only do that if you're going to come back. If you're never going to come back, don't worry about it. I'd rather you read the book and not read the end notes. There's great stuff in the end notes that'll deepen your experience, but it's not essential. The plot is as it is in the narrative. So don't worry about it. Forget it.
Let's talk a little bit more about those end notes. So in Audible, you hear number 1, and then what do? You have to click.
Well, you can go. There's actually they provide a PDF, so it gets a bit tricky. They provide this PDF that comes with it, and you can consult that, or you can get the end notes. They're available separately on audio, which is a mess. It's a total mess. So my advice would be don't worry about it. They're there if you want them, but they're not. It's not essential. It's not.
Well, I've read a few things about the end notes because when I started reading the book, I was reading a Kindle version, and I found it a total pain in the ass to, sort of click my cursor down to the number and then click and take me to the end note and then back and forth that way. And I often thought that a physical book would be easier because you could have like a bookmark at the back and you could quickly flip. So maybe in that way, a physical book is better to a Kindle version if you want to follow the end notes. But another question I have is why he's decided to put end notes in the book at all.
Well, there's a few theories about that. Superficial theories or are that he wants it to feel like a tennis game or something, like where you're going back and forth. Mm-hmm. Another is that he wants it to be a dialogue. He wants you to have an engagement with the book that you wouldn't normally have with another type of book. So you're sort of you're fully engaged because you're having to go to the back and read this extra thing and then go back to where you were. The narrative itself is sort of non-linear and back and forth in time, so it doesn't really feel that out of step with what you're already doing. Mm-hmm. So if you read it without the end notes, you're sort of jumping around everywhere anyway.
Yeah.
So going to the end and reading something going back isn't such a terrible shock. You know what I mean? Yeah. The lots of different kinds of information you get there. Sometimes it's just a definition of a type of drug or something, or it could be a whole exchange between two people, or it could be an extra thing that happened at a different time, or it could be, there's a whole filmography of a filmmaker that's in there, one of the characters. That's probably one of the most important ones, actually. But then again, if you know, well, I'll just give you the tip about that later, and it's fine. Like, once you know that bit of information, you can move on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think that people fret about these end notes.
But isn't he also, because he comes from an academic background and he has written a number of non-fiction essays, which I love, by the way. He does a great one about how he went on a cruise ship once and his whole experience there, which I recommend. So he's playing with that academic formula as well. Is
He
that?
is. Absolutely, of course. All of these are true. All of this is true. And I just think that, I just think people fret over them, and I would rather we don't talk about them. Let's talk about the story. Like I know, because obviously you can say, well, why has he done it then? And you say, well, don't worry about it. Just read the book and don't worry about them. Like if you love it and you feel it, then get into it. But if not, don't worry about it. Make that decision at the beginning and then move on.
Well, let's move on to the plot. Tell me what happens in this book.
Okay, all right. So we've got a couple of things to keep in mind to let you know. So the setting is America of the distant future. The near future, sorry. Most of the action takes place in downtown Boston. Okay, now it's a soft sci-fi story, so the world mostly resembles ours except for a few peculiarities. It's not like Brave New World or something like that, where it's completely different. It works the way ours works, which is why I love it. The most interesting thing about this time is that instead they've got this thing called subsidized time. Basically, the years have been sold to companies. So in the way that you would sell, like in the NBA, they say, the Pfizer dunk or whatever. They've sold that dunk or whatever to Pfizer, and then they replay it with the logo. They've gone so far in the future as to sell whole years. So instead of 2003, it's like the year of the Whopper. And then we've got the year of the Tux medicated pad, the year of the trial-sized Dove bar. Most of the action actually in the plot appears in the year of the Depend adult undergarment.
That's funny.
And so that's that is actually the main thread. So it'll say YOTD, sorry. And that's the year of the Depend adult undergarment. And then we go back in time every now and then to the different years. So the first chapter of the book, which is actually the climax. So the very first chapter you read is actually the climax. And that happens in the year of Glad. Then we go back in time. So the book's got a circular feel to it. So this subsidized time thing is just interesting. Helps you keep track of time. There's two spheres of action, the high and the low. So we've got the story is basically split in two in a way, two spheres, two heroes. So high on a hill at the Enfield Tennis Academy, we have Hal Incandenza, 16-year-old prodigy. He's a genius with language and a tennis superstar in the making, but with a very secret weed habit. Below the hill, we have the Ennett House Drug and Alcohol Recovery House. The hero of this sphere is Don Gately, late 20s, former petty criminal with a limited education, recovering from Demerol abuse and learning the sort of the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous way of life. So if you think about the book as being split between these two poles of Hal high up on the hill at his private tennis academy and Don Gately low on the bottom, okay? And then we have a lot of other threads. So, but the main threads are a tennis prodigy and a recovering drug addict. The story is nonlinear. It's told in a nonlinear way. We jump around to the present, the past, the future. One of the other main threads in the story is a discussion between two people in Tucson, Hugh Steepley and Remy Marat, a pair of triple agents who are on different sides, sharing a philosophical discussion throughout the book. Basically, Hugh is a burly man undercover as a female reporter, so he's now Helen Steepley, and Remy is a wheelchair-bound Quebecer, so that's from Quebec, doing all he can to save his wife. So I think that's the main threads. We've got Hal, we've got Don, and then we've got we keep coming back to this discussion between these two triple agents, and those triple agents are actually involved in the main genre plot that's going on in the background of the lives of everyone in the story. So although the story is very grassroots, and we'd really just living with these characters in their different spheres. We get this. The main plot is quite simple, but it's happening in the background. Basically, Hal's father, James Incandenza, as well as starting the tennis academy many years ago, was actually a brilliant scientist and filmmaker. Now, he tragically committed suicide before the story begins, and we never really meet him. Except before his suicide, he was a prolific filmmaker, as I said, of avant-garde films. He made a film called Infinite Jest, a film so amazing that when you see it, you want nothing else but to watch this film until you die. So basically, the idea is that they're on cartridges. That's the only thing that David Foster Wallace couldn't quite get his head around, is how we transmit all of that data across the airwaves. But the idea is that once you watch this particular cartridge, I think it's got a smiley face on it. You watch it, and then you become. It's almost like a virus. You just become catatonic. You know what I mean? You lose the ability to speak, and you just want to watch it over and over again until you die. There's no way of getting you out. It's like it's a death sentence. Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit like The Ring, then.
It is a little bit like The Ring in that way. So this cartridge was created by Hal's dad, and there are a range of people in the background of this. So the book's not a thriller, okay? But there are some people who are on the hunt for this cartridge. So basically, while Don Gately's in rehab, and Hal is at his tennis academy living their lives, there are a number of groups operating to try and locate the master copy of Infinite Jest. The most terrifying is a group of radical wheelchair-bound Quebecois terrorists who plan to distribute the film across what is the US. So it's called. So the US is actually called the ONAN now. But they want to distribute this across there to cripple the nation. Okay, and it'll be quite easy because everyone's so entertainment obsessed. So everyone wants to watch these things. But that's all background. There are a range of other characters we encounter, and they're all wonderful, in their own different way. We've got Oren. Hal's got a couple of brothers. Oren Incandenza, eldest brother. He's a football pro and womanizer. Mario Incandenza is the youngest brother, pure-hearted and disabled, filmmaker like his father, has a special camera on top of a helmet that he has because he's got a big club foot that he drags around. And he also uses a police lock, like this sort of like stick to keep himself upright. Puts it out from his chest, like you would. I think it's the sort of thing that's on a door in old style New York City apartments. You put like this stick in front of the behind the door so that people can't break in. So Mario's got one on his chest that he puts on the ground to stay upright while he's filming. So I've mentioned Hugh Steepley and Remy. They're those triple agents. Joelle Van Dyne, a film major who is so beautiful that it's considered a deformity and must therefore wear a veil at all times. So she's got this veil that she wears, Joelle Van Dyne.
Sounds Islamic.
Yes. So just to go back to some of my practical things. So basically, I think you can make the commitment to read this book. You know what I mean? Just tackle it. And, don't worry about the dickheads that have told you to read it. The world's got dickheads, and some of them like this book. So we just need to accept that. It's easier to make fun of the book and the people who read it than it is to read it. So that's just something we also have to accept. Now, the only other thing is just accept that you're not going to have 100% comprehension at all times. This isn't how we read anyway. I don't know where we got this from, this idea that like you've got to like read it. Like the only books you read and understand 100% are like Jack Reacher novels and stuff. Like you read that and you go, oh yes, I understand exactly where Jack is now, who he's doing what to and how all the time. And that's fine. Sometimes you need that. But this book isn't like that. There are times purposely where you're like, oh, geez, I'm not quite sure who's speaking right now, every now and then, or I'm not quite sure where I am. Or that's okay. It's a process. You misread things, you get tired, you find you've skipped a bit or whatever. But overall, by the end of it, you get it. Like, because really this is an entire world. This was a type of literature, like an encyclopedic novel. The idea is that it's so big and it's this entire city. I feel like I know 100 people in this city. Do you know what I mean? And all you're doing is getting little shards of their lives, and you put together the story as you go. Okay, so I think that people expect when they read it, they go like, "Oh, when's the story going to start?" Or when you go, "No, you're in it." Okay, like the idea is that you're getting the shards, and just think about it like a puzzle. Like you're putting each shard, each chapter is, a certain character or whatever, or a certain time of, you're just putting it all down on this tapestry. And trust me, by the end, you'll put it all together and you'll say, and you'll talk to someone else and maybe put it together and say, yeah, I get it now. I know what I relatively know what happened, but which isn't to say there's not ambiguities.
Well, I have read that the writing style is shards of characters' lives as they revolve around a central point, and that being the film Infinite Jest.
That's right. So I think that, don't come to it expecting that story about the cartridge is going to be in play in the way it would be like in a Mission Impossible movie, where that you're sort of hot on the trail of this thing. Just be excited when that thread or that plot in, all the people involved in it turn up. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's a delight. And you go, and it'll be a big gaps before that happens. And don't expect there's going to be a big climax. I've already told you the climax is the first chapter. So, ultimately it's about something else.
I was going to say, I remember that first chapter too. It was amazing.
Yes. So Hal is applying to get into university on his sports scholarship, and it doesn't go to plan.
Yes, that's excellent. Have you got much else to say about?
No, not really.
Infinite Jest?
All I'd say is that I just think overall it's about sincerity, and I think it's about this cancer of irony and postmodernism. I go on about this in the podcast all the time. Like, down with irony, man. Irony sucks. It's and postmodernism sucks too.
Well, Foster Wallace hated all that shit.
It's this book is about the yearning for connection. It's about loneliness, about what it means to be human, and particularly in the times we live in. And it's about authenticity and sincerity. And I've heard it called, this type of novel called the new sincerity. And I suppose the only way he could try and be sincere is to be self-referential, here and there in the book. But it really is about trying to get you to feel. And I feel every time I read it. I love this book. I just think it's glorious. And I wish I had more people to talk with about it, but I don't, because I have to get them to read it. And I think if I had to, I'd be happy to never recommend another book to someone if they were going to read this one. I'd be like, I'll never ask you to read anything. Just read this one. I know it's big, but just this one. Well,
I might have to dust off my Kindle version and have a read.
This is good.
Well, that's excellent. Thanks for your book recommendation. There's still a couple more days before Christmas, so you might think of it as a Christmas present for someone.
Yes. Get it for the right person, though, because if the person's like, I don't know, they might, it could go one of several ways.
You could no longer be friends with them, or
that's right,
perhaps best friends for life.
Yeah, let's hope for the latter.
Excellent. Well, enjoy your Christmas break, and we will see you on the other side. Long live the new flesh.
Long live the new flesh.